guess we can kind of get rolling. As people come in, we can get them up to speed. So, okay, Ambo Stitch, Danny Dada, everybody, Tanse. This is, I'm Buddy Dixon. I think most of you know who I am, have seen me a few times on these series. Today we have some of our friends from Momentum. Momentum is I guess my second life, along with VCC. Momentum has been doing their reconciliation journey, their Indigenous journey for quite some time. And, you know, they're really in a great place, and they've been doing great work, and they've been, you know, through our work, we've definitely hit some struggles, we've hit some barriers, and things we had to figure out as individuals, as an organization. So I've invited Brian Hill, who is the resource development director from Momentum, and has been kind of the lead of the Indigenous engagement strategy for quite some time, and has been a part of that work for quite some time, as well as Theodora Warrior from Bigani, who is our financial literacy facilitator. And she's you know, been with Momentum for a while now, right? I think 2 years. So we've been making some progress, and I'll kind of turn it over to Brian and Theodora to kind of introduce themselves to everybody, and then we can just hop right into the presentation here. So Brian, Theodora, I don't know which one of you want to go first, but
go ahead, Theodora.
Take it away.
All right. Okay, everyone, I'm Theodora Warrior, and I am the Financial Empowerment Facilitator, the first Indigenous facilitator with Momentum. And yeah, I'm really stoked about getting this information out and engaging with communities and helping us close that marginalization of our baseline. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And as Buddy said, my name is Brian Hill. Yeah, I've been working at Momentum for close to like almost 14 years now. So quite some time. And yeah, I've been able to be involved in some of our Indigenous engagement work since around 2018. I get to work with Buddy and Theodora a lot, which is a lot of fun. And yeah, I've got 3 kids. And I've been living in the Mohkinstsis area since I was like 3 years old. So pretty much living in Treaty 7 for most of my life. So maybe shall we jump right in, Buddy?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we can get right into it, and you're the puppet master right now.
Just do it up. Okay. So Theodora, I don't know if you want to try sharing our PowerPoint with the group, if that's gonna work.
When I clicked it, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So whoever the host is, allow me to share screen.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So I'll maybe Buddy or Jacqueline, if you can work on that, and then I'll just start going. And then when the PowerPoint pops up, I'll know it kind of worked. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I think like the goal here today is just to share a little bit about what the Momentum journey has been like over the last little while in terms of Indigenous engagement work. And very much as a disclaimer right off the bat, we need to say, like, we're sharing today just kind of as a case study, but not that we've gotten everything right. We've had a journey with ups and downs, and we have a long way to go still. So the intention of today is not like, hey, look how amazingly Momentum has been able to do this work. Is really just about us being able to share our story and see if there's anything that like resonates or anything practical that the folks on the call could take back to their organizations. And then we might also learn some things from you as well on the call. So moving to that first slide, you know, this Roy Bear Chief has been an elder for Momentum for a while, probably since around 2016. And he tells this story. If any of you have met Roy or had a chance to sit in on any of his language lessons or some of his teachings, but one of his teachings that he's really passionate about is about anidopc. And so anidopc is the spider web. And as Roy's brother Clement tells the story, Creator told the spider, I want you to take your web with the people and the world in it and put it down here. And then he told man, I will leave you with anidopc. If there are any problems, one of the strands of the web will vibrate and I will come help. But I want you to pattern your life after anidopc. When you create your relationships, if there's a vibration, you go and help. So this metaphor has been pretty important for us, this idea. And I think it's such a beautiful teaching of we're all on the web together. And when something's vibrating, maybe that means someone needs help somewhere, or there's an opportunity somewhere that you should be following. And so we've been trying to keep that metaphor in mind as we go about our Indigenous engagement work. So as this work started in around like 2015, 2016, I would say like, if you trace it all the way back, it really started with the personal, like a few people at Momentum who really had a passion to see this work in reconciliation move ahead at Momentum. And so I got to join a few years later. I was passionate about it. I think, you know, the way forward for our society, potentially, you know, even to save the human race or our environment, is to really pay attention to the Indigenous worldview. And I think those many different worldviews represent kind of a path out of the situation that we find ourselves in now. And then there's also the fact that Indigenous people over decades and centuries have been blocked from economic participation. And so for me personally, working at an economic development organization, I was really interested and curious in how that might be overcome and what role we might be able to play. So there's this personal connection that a few people at Momentum had that really said, hey, we think this matters. What could we do about it at Momentum? And so I was curious to ask, and I don't know if I can even put this in the chat, but maybe you don't have to have it put in the chat. But I was curious if people want to use the chat, what is it that motivates you personally to be involved in reconciliation work? So feel free, just like enter a word or phrase or something in there that, you know, everyone on this call is here for a reason, interested in this work, wants to engage. What is it that motivates you personally to be involved? So I'll give you just like 30 seconds here. Let me see if I can look at this chat here.
Yeah, and I think the big thing from that was, it was really a few individuals at Momentum that seen the importance of engaging in this reconciliation work and how important it was for Momentum to engage in it. And it started way back in 2016. And, you know, we at Momentum, we're still carrying on with it. It's been, what, 6 years now that we're going, and we still feel we're really at the beginning of this journey. And, you know, even though 5-6 years seems like a long time, it's, we're still just at the tip of it, and we haven't mastered anything yet. We're still sorting things out as they come across, and we're still coming to different barriers. But I think the important thing is we've been on this journey, and it has taken a while. It wasn't a 1-year solution, a 2-year solution. We've been on it for some time now.
Totally. Yeah, nice. And the chat is starting to open up here. This is great. Thank you for your participation. That really means a lot to us. So we had Heather. As a person of color, I recognize how important it is to engage in this work, how important it is for us to uplift each other in our communities. Nice. Charles. Hey, Charles. Good to see you on the call. Righting wrong so we can move forward stronger. Yep. And Rita, it's the right thing to do, and do right by our Indigenous compatriots and active social justice, the right thing to do. Yeah, totally. Cool. Okay, so that, just like one point, it's important to establish, you know, these changes at organizations. it's if they can kind of start organically within the passion and commitment of people as individuals, and then form something and build upwards, that's a nice way to do it, as opposed to kind of, here's an institutional mandate that's being brought down that now we need to do Indigenous engagement work. So all of us on this call and in our communities are the ones who can start to like prompt action and change in our organizations. Social justice and equity, commitment to finding a way forward together. Nice, thanks Bernice. Cool, so on the next slide, so 2015 TRC calls to action come out. We were wondering, what is our role as an economic development agency? What role should we play? We're not an Indigenous-led agency, but we're all about community economic development. And there's so many parallels between Indigenous ways of knowing and doing things and view of the economy and a local community economic development approach. So we felt like there might be some good like crossover and integration that could happen there. So that one of the first steps was actually to create an Indigenous engagement strategy. So I just copied the first cover page of that. That's on the left. And folks who you on the call may know Monique Fry and Christy Morgan, but they were the ones that helped guide this strategy. So that was an important step, that it wasn't us writing up what we thought would be a good strategy, but it was these knowledge keepers from the community that assessed where we were at, our strategy, where we were going, what work we did in the community, and then mapped out some ideas of where we could go. And it was kind of funny because we wanted a whole bunch of different timelines and dates. And Chrissy and Monique were like, okay, yeah, we'll put those in there for you. But, you got like, this is a long, slow, steady approach here. But yes, we'll give you your timelines and your tables and things like that the Western folks like to see in there. This was a very well done strategy and was the foundation to set us up for success in our strategy work. So and you can see some of the key like recommendations. We can probably share these slides if people want afterwards, but those are the 4 key areas that Monique and Christy said, here's where you should start. And then what's important, so the next slide, that strategy was wrapped up and placed in a bundle. We had a blessing, and that bundle is found right at the front of Momentum if you walk through our doors. And I will not get the pronunciation of the word right, but it means state of mind, will, and emotions, that word. So it's all of our collective energy going towards this bundle and taking care of it. And that I felt was a really nice metaphor for all of us to think of, is this Indigenous engagement strategy is, in a way, it's like this newly birthed thing, this entity that we are together and collectively taking care of. So
I think just to acknowledge, it was Elder Clement, or not Elder Clement, it was Elder Clarence Wolflake Sr. and Elder Roy Bearchief that actually led that bundle ceremony for us. And I think it was one of the first experiential learnings we had at Momentum. So it was Elder Clarence that led us with that piece of the bundle naming and the bundle creation.
Totally. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, buddy. And that was a really nice way to, not just a nice way, it was actually, that was the way that was needed to launch the work that we were doing.
And this is a Blackfoot. It's a Blackfoot bundle. Elder Clarence and Elder Roy are both from Siksika. And this is a Blackfoot bundle, and the ceremony they performed was through the Blackfoot culture. So that's why it has the Blackfoot name. Itzita.
Okay, there you go. Good, thank you, buddy. So our strategy now has 4 pillars that have kind of emerged from the original ones and the strategy that was created in 2016. They're similar, but they've emerged in terms of language. And this is just a screenshot of within our organizational strat map. Here's the key 4 areas that we want to move the needle when it comes to our Indigenous engagement work. So, we could just like briefly touch on some of these, but in the next slide, there's all these learning events that we've been able to participate in. And those have been, I feel like for us, those were kind of the gateway to staff getting involved and engaged and interested in our Indigenous engagement work. It was come to a learning event, join a book club. We read through Indian Horse together as a staff and board. And let's talk about these things. And I think on the next slide is one of the experiences we did somewhat recently in 2021. Oh no, that's just an example of our overall work plan and how you notice the Anito PC spiderweb framework is kind of in the background to remind us of Roy's teaching. And so then on the next slide, maybe, is, yeah, Della's story. So just to give a shout out to USAY and this Della's Story event, just as an example of a fantastic learning event in the city. If you haven't heard of it, reach out to Leanne Ireland at USAY, but this was a great experiential learning event for our staff. Buddy, do you want to talk about, touch on the grow pillar and the mural?
Yeah. And I think just to kind of touch on that learn thing, we knew that in order for staff at Momentum to be comfortable engaging with Indigenous communities, engaging with Indigenous organizations, Indigenous participants, or even just in Indigenous topics, we knew it was important that we had to provide learning opportunities for the staff so they become comfortable and knew how to approach, and it was familiar for them to do. So we always make it a goal for ours to host a number of learning opportunities for our staff to engage in, so that they can build that confidence and that understanding of the different communities. But yeah, the grow pillar, like Brian said, that's kind of one that is really organizationally, and how do we grow our organizationally to include more Indigenous ways of knowing into our policy work, into our curriculums, into our just everyday culture at Momentum. How can we do that? What are the steps we can take? And one of the things here from what you see on the presentation is a large mural. Dimensions, Brian, 8 by 10, I think.
I think, yeah, I think that's right.
I think it's like 8 feet by 10 feet. It's posted right up when you first walk into Momentum. On the left there, you can see Keegan Starlight. He's from Tsuut'ina. He's the gentleman that actually created this mural for us. And what we wanted to do is create this welcoming space for Indigenous people, as well as all people in Calgary that come to Momentum. We want to create a safe and welcoming space. We didn't want it to be just for Indigenous people. We wanted to try to create it for all people that came into Momentum. And one thing we wanted to do was, by creating this mural, was when somebody from Treaty 7 walks in to our space and they see this mural, they're able to recognize and identify with any one of these flags that are on here. So quick question in the chat. Anyone know whose flags these all are and what nations they belong to and what treaty they all belong to? That's kind of some learning we have. This mural also does. It's our way at Momentum to acknowledge the land and acknowledge the nations within Treaty 7. There's an answer. The nations of Treaty 7, this is our visual land acknowledgement to where we are and the place we work in. So it's pretty awesome. It was quite the process. Right up front there in the red, you got Tsuut'ina, and then as you go down the right side, it's Tsuut'ina, the Wesley Nation, the Chiniki Nation, the Bearspaw Nation, and the Métis Nation. And then on the left side, you got the Blackfoot Confederacy with Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai there as well. So we included all the nations of Treaty 7 because that's the territory we as Momentum work within, and those are our boundaries, is Treaty 7 territory. And that's a lot of where we focused our learning on. There's so much Indigenous culture throughout Canada. Sometimes we get confusing and mixed up. So Momentum, we really just focused on Treaty 7 because this is the area we work in, and these are the communities we want to engage in Maybe once we become experts with Treaty 7, we'll dive out and head north, and maybe do Treaty 6 or Treaty 8. But we're still trying to master Treaty 7, and that's why we've just been learning about Treaty 7 for the last 5-6 years. That's kind of the grow pillar. It's all about creating a safe space and acknowledging the land, acknowledging the folks, and how do we incorporate more Indigenous ways into our policies and into our staffing and things like that to create it really welcoming. How's that, Brian?
Yeah, that's perfect, buddy. Yeah. I'll never forget the moment in the office when we were just walking around the new space and he was like, what if instead of just like a land acknowledgement that's written down, what if we had like a mural and there's like mountains and there's a valley and it leads to Calgary and so he kind of cast that vision, and then him and another person at Momentum kind of worked with Keegan to make it come to life. So yeah, that's pretty cool little project. So we've talked about the learn pillar a little bit. We've talked about the grow pillar. The next is the partner pillar. Just recognizing that when doing Indigenous engagement work, on this slide here, just to show, we also years back renamed our classrooms to reflect animal names that were kind of commonly held in higher regard by multiple Indigenous communities. So instead of classroom A, classroom B, classroom C, not super creative names, renamed beaver, buffalo, whale, wolf, eagle, and also to highlight just connection to land, to recognize that even as we do our economic development work, we are anchored in the land that we're on and the animals that use that land. So that was another kind of fun project. So on the partner side, we recognize that that's like the Indigenous engagement work we're going to do. A lot of it is going to result from partnering with other agencies, other initiatives, other networks that, you know, as a non-Indigenous agency, it's not going to be us like right out in front. It's going to be us behind, kind of supporting what's going on in the community. And so just one example in that next slide, we did a report, a consultation, where we wanted to know what are the money, because Momentum does a lot of financial literacy. I haven't like totally given the overview of Momentum, but a lot of the work we do is financial literacy and financial empowerment. And so we just went out to the community to ask people questions about what money issues, challenges, and opportunities is your community facing? And then what do you think some of the solutions are, and how could Momentum potentially play a role in that? And in the next slide, I think you can see a lot of these interviews with Aboriginal Futures, but lots of them had to happen through Zoom. We planned like these in-person consultations, and we were going to eat food together and learn from one another. And then COVID happened. We all know the story. And so this ended up being more of a Zoom kind of interview project, but people were very generous with their time and very open and candid with their thoughts on what was needed in that realm of financial literacy and the different ways of even viewing money and how important that is to take into consideration. And so we learned a lot in that project, and it just really emphasized the value of having relationships in the community where we can just ask people, what do you see as our role in this whole ecosystem? And then also trying to emphasize that, you know, Tim Fox talks about this a lot, but not just staying at knowledge extraction, but taking knowledge and then putting it into use. And so this My Friends report helped to change some things at Momentum, and kind of having Theodora be more involved in financial literacy work was one of the tangible outcomes of that. And she's going to talk about that a bit later. And then the last pillar, so that's the partner pillar, how we partner with others. And then the last one is the commit pillar. And this one mostly is about taking the TRC calls to action that we feel like most connect to Momentum's work, and then figuring out where within the organization it makes sense to embed those calls to action and try to activate them. And so there's a screenshot here of in our strat map, we've got these different areas of our strat map, and then layered throughout are the calls to action that fit within that body of work. So we wanted to ask you all at this point So that we've given you a bit of an overview of kind of how, like, the key areas of what Momentum's Indigenous engagement has looked like. But we were curious to know, what is one event or activity that has happened at your organization that has been beneficial in moving your reconciliation activity forward? Because maybe this is an opportunity to keep learning from each other. Maybe there's something we haven't considered before, or others in the call haven't considered before, that we could share with one another. So I'll just put that question in here if that's going to work.
Yeah, and I think while those while we're going through the chat there, I know there's 94 calls to action. That's a lot of calls to take up. And that was one thing at Momentum we looked at, was if we were to do all 94 calls, we would have to create new things at Momentum. And we would have to do things that Momentum wasn't already doing. So we looked at the 94 calls, and we were able to see what do we at Momentum do now, and what calls are currently out there that we can focus on and that we can include into our work. And there's 5 calls that we work in within, like Momentum's about economic development. So there's that education piece there with all the money management stuff and all the trades programming. So we said, okay, we can focus on call number 7 around education, and how do we open the doors more? How do we make it more accessible for Indigenous people? And we got some cool stuff coming in the new year around Indigenous education and things like that. So also around healthcare, where do we fit in, and how do we do that? Around call number 21 around health. And that was creating a space. Our staff and our participants at Momentum are now able to smudge within our building. There is I guess it's a quiet space, we can call it, where anyone from any faith can go in and take some time out for themselves, but we're able to smudge, and staff and participants have access to that. So those are just kind of some, 2 of the calls that we can talk about, but those are things that Momentum was already doing, and we just figured, how can we do them better with the Indigenous communities? Because it was a lot to tackle all 94, and why do 90 things halfway when we can focus on 4 or 5 that are going to really, that we can do great instead of just good. So that was kind of the thought process around us committing to those 5 calls.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good kind of context for the TRC piece, buddy. Thanks for that. And then
and with the all with the levers of change, there's also calls associated to those levers in the Enough for All strategy. So you can see those there as well, and how they fit into those levers and how they activate. So
nice. Okay, we've got some chat activity here and some interesting ideas. The Indigenous Canada online course, that's what Holly's talking about in terms of what's going on at WINS, and all members of management are taking that. That's great. That's a pretty in-depth course there, Holly, and that's fantastic. That's such a great idea. There might be some others on this call that have taken that. I took most of it. I got through most of the modules of that one. It was really well done. And Bernice sharing, building a library of culturally relevant resources, staff are reading, and then come together for a conversation around is that call to action number 92, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Cool. So it's kind of like choose your own adventure, do some reading, and then let's come together and let's connect and let's talk. More or less. Cool. And then Lenny, CLG, is that Calgary legal guidance? Yeah, cool. Yeah. Organize a Blackfoot TP teaching for a team. Start to finish, we're involved by taking down the TP, how wide is set the way it is. Cool. Meaning of the designs on that TP.
And I can't stress enough with those experiential learnings, like the one Linny's talking about, it of how important those are, to engage in, to have staff, and individuals just engage in that experiential learning is so beneficial. And at Momentum, we try to aim for 2 or 3 of those experiential learning events a year, where we give that opportunity for folks to engage. And hopefully, once we kind of get through COVID here, and we can begin to engage a little more into those.
Yeah, that TP exercise sounds amazing.
Yeah. We want to have one. Can we have one?
That sounds cool. Who led that one, Lenny? Just kind of curious.
Kent, a young man.
Okay. Sorry, say that again.
Kent, a young man.
Okay.
Yeah, he has
Cool.
2 TP designs and has done a lot of work throughout the city. I think he's worked with SAIT a couple of times, putting up TP, taking down. He's worked with over the winter, I think it was called Blast. And then recently he put up TP again for, I forget that lady's name, but she does those walks through the city and along the river line and whatnot. Yeah, that was just the most recent one that he had done after that. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that one. And then we have here, and then Holly, okay, from Rita, and a smudging ceremony, Lost Kids that wins as well. Cool. Okay. Yeah, these are great examples. It seems like a number of organizations, number of us on this call, we've been trying to do some things to keep moving things ahead at the agencies that we're at, or the networks we're a part of. And that looks differently depending on the agency. Probably all of us as well, I'm guessing, experience some challenges or barriers or even mistakes as we go about doing this work. And so one challenge we had at Momentum, I would invite Theodora to share about one of these challenges because it was very connected to her area of work. So I wonder if you could share that briefly with us, Theodora, and what that barrier kind of looked like.
Which one?
Well, it's only a 1 hour call, so you have to pick one.
Yeah, so let's see, one of the barriers was in Momentum stating that we are acknowledging land, but they only went 150 kilometers outside of Calgary. So I brought it to their attention that if we're gonna say that we're on Treaty 7 land, then we need to include of all of Treaty 7 nations. And we were missing the largest reserve, which is Kainai, and sister reserve Bigani, where I'm from, is down closer to the border. So we're about 2 hours away from Calgary. And it was just like I don't know, I think it's like 46 more kilometers and we would have reached them both. So yeah, I brought that up to make sure that we are inclusive of all Treaty 7, not just a border, a boundary, that we are expanding that to include all of, make sure that we reach every community and every, have that opportunity to create those partnerships and really engage with all of Treaty 7 on and off reserve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was something, when I first began at Momentum, those were talks we started to have, and within Momentum, like Theodora said, we just have that border of kind of where we work within, and it's been there for quite some time. But when we really want to engage now, that's kind of a barrier we faced in Theodora's work, was we can't now we can only go, I guess our borders are only 150, where a circle of 150 kilometers around Calgary is where Momentum does its work within. But like Theodora said, Bigani and Kainai are out of our reach. But at the same time, we say we do Treaty 7. So we had to have those conversations again of, we can't say, how do we make this work? And I believe Theodora and the management team and leadership all had those conversations, and it wasn't it was just something that needed to happen, and it was a great thing now that we can venture out to Picani and Kainai. Next thing I'm gonna advocate for is getting into Browning so I can go get some American munchies.
I thought you were going to say red wieners.
And red wieners.
That's the next phase of Indigenous engagement and momentum.
Yeah, we're going to get right in there.
Yeah. There's dual objectives.
Of course, they have to include food.
Thanks for sharing that example, Theodora. And that's been that's been part of the work, with Theodora coming on board and then bringing financial literacy back to her community. It's been just really neat to see that happen. And I think it hopefully connects to that Roy Bear Chief teaching of follow the vibrations. If it hadn't been for Theodora, I don't think we'd be pushing internally like, hey, we got to get this to Kainai. We have to find a way to make that happen. But Theodora is here and she's really interested in bringing that content to her community. And so we kind of let's follow the vibration and see where this goes and what she can do with it. And so it's been cool to watch that unfold. Maybe we'll speak to another challenge is, and you can just because it's on the slide right now, lots of, if as we make investments of resources and funds into Indigenous engagement work, then there's always the question of how do we report on it? What are the KPIs of that work? The board wants to know, how do we measure progress? What is that going to look like? What are the milestones going to be? So we've always tried to find this kind of middle ground. Buddy might argue that we probably swing more towards the Western side often on it than the Indigenous side. But yeah, we do have quarterly reports that have our intended key activities that we want to see done in a year under each of the pillar areas. We've set KPI targets in our strategic map that say we want to track the number of Indigenous kind of partnerships that we enter into. We want to track the percentage of staff and board who identify as Indigenous, but we haven't set targets for those things. We felt like that wasn't the right way to go. So just sharing that as how we've kind of tried to find. And then, on the balancing side of that is in our quarterly reports, Buddy will often, instead of writing a narrative, a bunch of paragraphs down on the activity, he will do Buddy live on a podcast and record audio storytelling style. Here's what happened with the Learn pillar. And it's just an audio recording of Buddy sharing about what's gone on there. And similar with our annual report, usually it's a written document. We mail or email it out to people. But I think it was 2 years ago that we had a few just oral stories shared about how the work is going, and Buddy recorded one of those too. So definitely attention, and one that we're always trying to navigate, trying to fulfill both sides in a way.
Yeah. And I think that's our biggest struggle is, momentum is not an Indigenous only organizations like some out there. We are just trying to incorporate the best views and the best Indigenous ways into the way we do work, and it's almost trying to find the parallel of what do we do on the western side? Well, what's the equivalent and what's the parallel on the Western side that we can do to still accomplish this? We can't get rid of our metrics, we can't get rid of our KPIs. But how can we adapt those to fit more into an Indigenous culture? And how can we tell that story more instead of just writing it out and having people read it? It's more of that oral tradition that we continue to try to follow and things like that. On that slide, you see there's no dates. This says January to June. There's no dates. I think I said this before. Everything will get done before the year's over. Before the fourth quarter is done, we'll get it. We'll get it all done. And that's just kind of because of the Anitopisi and what vibrates within our work at a certain point of time gets done. We just kind of follow that vibration to complete our tasks. We know what they are, and we wait for them to vibrate so we can get up to them. So.
Yeah, that's good, buddy. That kind of extra context on the balance of those two worlds.
Yeah.
And then like there's been moments on the journey where we've just made mistakes. Like the bundle name that we shared at the beginning of the presentation, we spelled it wrong. And initially we spelled it wrong. And then we like shared the website with Roy where we talked about the bundle, and Roy was like, the page looks good, but you've misspelled that word and it is reading like baked potato right now. Like to him, as he reads it, that's what it sounds like, is baked potato, as opposed to the name of our strategy. So, you know, things like that
for wellness, and I got baked potato.
So we were reminded of, okay, whenever like you're gonna integrate language, check it a few times, make sure that it's right. And Roy was pretty gracious in that, which was nice. One mistake I've made personally is paying people late who have helped us out or given us wisdom and come to share their knowledge. And there's been moments just because sometimes administration is not my strong point. And it's been like, okay, oh, thanks for doing the thing today. Okay, we'll get this into finance right away and we'll get you paid. And I think like what we've learned now is that we need to have payment for people before or on the day of when they're doing a thing. Later, like that's a way to show honor, is to have that ready when they do their thing or before. Whatever knowledge it is they're sharing, or a blessing or a prayer or whatever it might look like. And I remember with the fellow who did our anti-racism training, did a very good job with it. His name was Ashley Prairie Chicken, I think, buddy. Yeah,
Ashley Prairie Chicken.
And he did a great session for us. And I just remember like I didn't have my act together, and the check, like we sent it after the event and then it got lost in the mail, and I was just like, oh, this is not how you build good relationships. So it's a simple thing, but I think it's an important one that we've learned to try to get right over time. Yeah, and then always within, similar to this follow the vibrations, there's some pockets within the organization that seem to be like taking a hold of this work and running with it. And then there's other pockets of the organization where it's not totally the case. And so we have about 60 people that work here at Momentum. And so that is we've kind of learned to work with that and say, you know, we're going to keep inviting people to the events that we do and trying to like push folks to include in their work plans an Indigenous engagement and reconciliation item. But we're also going to kind of follow where the energy is as well, and say, hey, where's the interest here? And then let's fan that flame as much as we can. So that's like a challenge and an opportunity is, you know, some folks, so sometimes it's the same people that attend the learning events, and we're kind of like, it would have been good to get, you know, a few more folks that don't always come out to these events to attend. So yeah, those are a few barriers and challenges. And so we thought we'd maybe ask a question. This might be kind of like, there might be a touch of vulnerability associated with this question, but we are interested to know, like, what is a barrier to advancing reconciliation work at your organization? If you're willing to share something, just be like, I think interesting because we're all at organizations that have strengths and have great opportunities to move the needle forward. And then there's always barriers that show up. So if you can think of a barrier Or if you have, you know, a story where you've kind of dropped the ball or had an oops moment that maybe could be instructive to the rest of us, we'd love to hear that too. So I'll put it in the chat here.
And I think it goes both ways. It's not just for the Indigenous barriers, or for non-Indigenous folks hurdling Indigenous barriers. It's also for us Indigenous folks trying to sort out the Western barriers and things like that. I think I've shared in the past that it's always difficult for me to share at the beginning of something, just because of, you know, not being trustworthy, right? It takes a while for for me to build trust. And there's been so many fly in, fly out things that's just happened to our nations, where people come in and tell us this is good for you, this isn't good for you. So there's always that trust that comes with it. But so that was always kind of a barrier for me, is how I know I'm going into these circles, I know I'm going into these engagements. I need to trust him, but sometimes it's difficult for me to do it, and things like that. And I have difficult time speaking. That's just a personal one. It may not seem like it, but speaking, I think sometimes we as Indigenous folks think just because we're Indigenous, we know everything Indigenous. I don't know much about Indigenous stuff fully. You know, I can speak on for who I am and where I come from, but I can't tell you anything about Theodora and her community, as well as Linny. I can't even speak on Linny and her community, because that's not where I'm from, right? So it's a unique thing, and it's just a barrier that I think we as Indigenous people face as well. So we got some stuff coming into chat, Brian.
This is where we get to the juicy conversations, eh? Immediate one for wins, maybe the financial means to get this done. Scrape to be thorough. So just kind of having the financial resources to really invest in a meaningful way in this body of work. Is that right, Rita?
Exactly. I think that's what I'm getting at. The will may be there, but to not make this a checkbox item, you need money to really do what needs to be done. Like I was observing, you know, the changes in the names of rooms. That's a small thing to do, but then when you have to think about, well, you have to remove that room name and put on a new one, or develop that beautiful mural that we did see, or have staff, you know, comprehensively trained. What does that even mean for all of the various operations you have? Like, Wins is a social enterprise. Would we want this to permeate into our thrift stores, like to make sure this is not one-sided? To me, there are very many questions running around in my head, and I just see dollar signs in front of all of them.
Right. Yeah, totally. Where do you begin, and how, like, all these things do take time and money, even if it's something like renaming classrooms or getting a mural up. There's time and money associated with all these things. And so what's the path to making sure that we're meaningfully putting the time and money towards the work, and not just trying to have it be like sort of a quick checkbox that we keep moving on from? I think that's sort of what I'm taking from your comment, Rita.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's true. And every organization is in a bit of a different place financially in terms of financial flexibility. Yeah, at Momentum, what has been helpful is that we've had kind of a fundraising stream of our revenue where undesignated dollars flow through from donors, and those undesignated dollars often can be used for projects like this. Where it's kind of a project that we want to integrate across the organization, but it's not necessarily a budget line in all of these different programs. So that's what's been helpful for us. And then we linked with Calgary Foundation for some funding for the My Friends project about 2 years ago. And then that helped kind of fund that project. And then some of our staff time that was connected to this work as well. But that is always that's always a challenge. Just recognizing the time. I don't know, Theodora, if you want to like close with anything, with like a comment or a story or an insight, and then maybe we can open it up and see if people have any more questions that they want to ask. Oh, here, there's one more comment here too from Bernice. It's big work, reconciliation work. Yep. And then we're cautious about making mistakes. Totally. Put your resource into a long-term process. Start with small steps with the right intention. Yep. When it becomes part of the plan, then yes, exactly. Totally. Starting somewhere, taking steps. And then when it gets to that point where it can be named in a strategic map, then now we're talking about unlocking some budget and resources towards that work. So that it's definitely this kind of iterative step-by-step journey to make it a priority.
Yeah, and I think that, before Theodore shares, that was kind of one thing we noticed really with our journey at Momentum is we had to start really small. And, the first little while was just learning about Treaty 7. It was just learning about, the different nations within Treaty 7, providing, just learning opportunities for us to see. And we've, we do have the strategy that we do follow, but we kind of follow it, but don't really follow it. We kind of go in a roundabout way, and we follow those vibrations. We always go back to an ETPC because it's such a core part of our Indigenous work now. But when things are bubbling, when things are really vibrating, that's where we go and focus on. But it takes a long time, and like Brian said, you just have to start somewhere, and just take your time, go through it. I wouldn't be afraid of making mistakes if you're doing it along your learning journey and you're being truthful and respectful about it, and always, like I said, I don't know the answers all the time. Sometimes when I don't know something, I'll ask Theodora. I do the Texa Elder kind of approach as well. I think that's probably, so I got two things on my radar. I'm going to develop a how to engage with Indigenous communities with step-by-steps and metrics for everybody. And I'm going to sell that and become super famous. But I'm also going to develop the Texa Elder app that everyone can dive into and have that relationship with elders. But that's all it is. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't let mistakes be a barrier for anyone to continue in their Indigenous work. If you're going into it truthfully and honestly and you make those mistakes, that's okay. Someone will correct you. It won't be a punishment. It won't be a scolding. It'll just be, this is how to approach it next time. When we make mistakes at Momentum, we acknowledge it. We usually get corrected and clarification from our elders or from the community, so we don't make that mistake next time. And we're constantly stumbling, and we're constantly making mistakes, but that's one less barrier we've had to worry about now, because we make them, we correct them, and we just keep rolling. So don't be afraid to make mistakes with the work.
Theodora, do you want to bring us home? And then if anyone has any questions specifically about our Momentum's work, you could put them in the chat, then we might have a minute to answer at the end, or then you can be in touch with us afterwards too, if there's anything you wanted to keep connecting on.
Okay, everyone. So this is a picture of my reserve. This is the Old Man River, and those are Porcupine Hills in the back. Right down there, we call that High Bush. And my mother just actually grew up across the river there. Yeah, I always get compliments on this picture. It's just a beautiful summer day on my reserve. Something important that I found out while working with Momentum is underneath all of these flags, all of them combined, is our population count. And our population count, we sit just under 30,000. So that means there's only 30,000 of us in all of Treaty 7. And to me, it's a pretty sad number, but it's also, you know, a workable number. And I just think, like, my passion is bringing this home, this financial literacy home to our people, because we weren't taught money, we didn't know how to handle it, and now is our time. Now we're stepping out, and we're, you know, having these opportunities to be in front of ourselves and being able to share our knowledge. And so, you know, you look at all of these flags and, you know, under 30,000, and if I can reach, you know, just one, that's like so much for me. And that's why it was really important to acknowledge Indigenous and all of us that sit under Treaty 7, is that, you know, we're a workable number. We're there, and we can teach this to our children and those futures, and really, you know, do some positive changes. So I got married here last weekend, and like this is how Momentum is. They created a safe enough space for me to bring my my tribe to the wedding. Um, and you know, my Momentum family was so super awesome in helping me and us, you know, use the space and achieve what we had to that day, because they're just, you know, so being very open and welcoming, and you know, then you create these relationships, and they're everlasting, positive relationship building opportunities. So yeah, there's our we had a knowledge circle, sharing and gathering, listening, providing that safe space to be heard and to share and grow with one another. Learning and growing is always happening here, and I think that's important, you know, to know. So yeah.
Thanks, Theodora.
And it's a journey, everyone. I know we get caught up on expecting to have it done and be experts in the indigenous ways and indigenous views and indigenous culture, and we put a timeline to it. But at Momentum, we've learned to really, we have a big goal. We want to be experts. My big goal is to work myself out of a job where Momentum is totally comfortable. They don't need Buddy anymore to engage with them on their indigenous work. There's enough capacity built internally where they can take it and be comfortable and have their own connections and their own networks and their own relationships. So it takes time to build all of these. In the Indigenous community, that's what comes first. It's relationships before business, and friendships and visiting. So, you know, set metrics, set goals that allow you that time to build those relationships, because that's what we've done at Momentum. We've taken our time to do this work. It's probably not as quick as people would like it to be within Momentum, but it's moving along at a steady pace, and it's you know, we're still learning, and hopefully one day we'll actually reach all our goals. So I think that's kind of it. We're past time. I thank you guys all for joining us this afternoon, hearing our story at Momentum. If at any point you have any questions directly related to this presentation, I could be, I guess, the point of contact. So send me your notes, and then I can share them in with Brian and Theodora, and we can get those answers or whatever out to you. With that, have a good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining our series again.